bit, but let us clear around that. Do we or do we not need the Francophones?
Let us take the second French Revolution away for a while and just look at our situation as Southern Cameroonians and the Francophones in Cameroon. Now, we are looking at approximately 80% to 20% of our population. So it's, 4-1. Every revolution, every struggle in which you are the minority, in which you are numerically on the disadvantage, requires that you go beyond just your struggle. You need to buy into the conscience, into the well-being, the good thought, the good sense of the opponent, and get them to start seeing things from your perspective. Yeah. Now, let me give the example of the civil rights struggle in the US. African Americans were the minority. They struggled for a long time, coming from slavery, slave trade, slavery, through to the fights for civil liberties. What got them to win was not just the strength of the African American. It was the strength of the African American and the fact that the African American was able to get into the head of the white American and get them to understand that what was being done to African Americans was unfair. And as soon as you started to get more and more white people fighting on behalf of African Americans, then you started to see better results. Same with our case. Think back about 8 months ago when this thing started. Think back 2 years ago. Yeah. There was a clear-cut narrative that Southern Cameroon is part of the whole of Cameroon and one and indivisible. Yeah. When this thing broke out 8 months ago, it was the same thing. Oh, we are one and indivisible. Yeah. Think about the narrative 6 months, 8 months down the line. It's beginning to say, oh, no, we understand your problem. We can actually talk about federalism. There is a way we can work this thing out. Why? Because we have gotten into their heads. We have educated them. And they now begin to realize that, no, actually, all along we've been taught the wrong education. Now, push this thing a bit more and get them to realize that, in fact, we are all victims of a system. We all suffer economically. We are all under the yoke of France. And once you start to build this narrative that gets them to understand, you begin to build more allies. Why do you want to create enemies when you can have more friends? And the more friends you have, the easier it is for you to attain what you want. So do we need Francophones? There is no doubt about that. Anybody who tells you anything to the contrary is lying. Or is probably telling you that out of ignorance. Let me give it to you. Because of our struggle and the influence we've been able to exert in Burkina Faso, Francophone Cameroon elite activists, nationalists decided to hold their own conference and to have a discussion around the crisis in Cameroon. Yeah. Why? They wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for us. No. And once they begin to organize such conferences, not in the country, outside of the country, it tells you that we are having an impact. What I do personally, every now and then, if I have some time, I go to some Francophone Jangui or to some meeting of Francophones and I educate them. And by the time I leave from there, I have 1 or 2 of them who are beginning to discuss in a different manner. They tell a different story. And the more we get them to point, and remember that largely from the beginning of this crisis, their arsenal was pointed at us. What we should do, and we are doing, is that gradually their arsenal is beginning to turn and point towards the real enemy, that is the regime. So, do we need Francophones? Yes. They are numerically superior. They have got the resources in their favor. They've got a lot in their favor. We need to take those weapons and turn it against the enemy.
And that enemy is the government of La Republic.
It's the regime
not
in Yaoundé.
The people of La Republic.
No, we cannot target the people. We target the regime. The regime is our enemy. And once you do that, you start getting the people, everybody. Now, look at SCBC, the television. Yeah. Now, this is being watched in some of the most remote parts of Francophone Cameroon. What does that tell you? There is interest in what we are doing. Our television is educating them. The people are beginning to turn. They're beginning to ask questions that they never asked before. A good example, a friend of mine, very popular and respected politician, struggle activist, spent 2 years in jail, in Mr. Biya's jail, as a result of his activism and opposition to the regime, was one of the brains behind the ghost towns in the 90s. When this whole thing broke out, he's the one who called me, and we had a long conversation. And when I spoke about the revolution, he said, "Oh, that's not a revolution. It's just a spring that will fizzle out with time." 2 months down the line, he called me and was like, "Milan, you were right. Actually, this is a revolution." Now, what has happened? We have just educated one of the best minds in Francophone Cameroon. So, and somebody like him, and of course, after that conversation and a series of actions and conversations over time, he became one of the brains behind the organization of the conference in Burkina Faso. So that tells you how you can engage somebody and to make a complete U-turn and start fighting in your favor.
Wow.
So back to your question, do we need Francophones? Yes, Francophones. In fact, we need everybody that can be an ally, everybody. So let's not dismiss certain people simply because we spite them. It doesn't help us. Let's build our arsenal of friends and narrow down our enemies so that when we target them, we target narrow, easier, and we get our targets to the point where we win easily.
Wow. So Milan, in a nutshell, you are